story here is we're not prepared. We didn't learn our lesson from COVID-19. And we can get into that and I can explain why.
Yes. I mean, you brought an interesting point up, which is that, clearly we were all freaked out about COVID, but the mortality rate was only about, 1%. So what have we learned or not learned, and have people just kind of forgotten about it when they should be paying more attention, that we could face another outbreak, even if it's not Ebola, which is not airborne? We have measles and we have other things that we're hearing about when everyone thought measles was gone.
Well, and don't forget about the avian bird flu, which they estimate is around 30% deadly.
Wow.
That's actually been spreading in cattle and birds and other animals. So I think what we've learned is a lot. What we're doing about it is something different. So I think, we've really done a good job in the vaccine space in terms of being prepared. I think we can make billions of doses of vaccines quicker than we used to and get those out. But a vaccine is too late when an outbreak comes because you're already infected with disease. If you remember, at the beginning of COVID, there were people in the hospital on respirators. What you really need are monoclonal antibodies or treatments, which is the first line of defense.
Right,
and quite frankly, yeah.
Yeah, and that's where Dyadic comes in. I mean, you, again, have been on the cutting edge of this technology for so long. Explain how it works, because it is very scientific, but it's also biological, and you're attacking these things on both ends, from preventative standpoint and also from a once infected standpoint. So explain how it works on the prevention leg of this potential crisis.
Well, first, let me explain, with our connection with Israel, with the Israel Institute of Biological Research, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Initiative, CEPI, the European Union Vaccine Hub, and Oxford University, Scripps, and others, we've been working with and are working with, sort of trying to, let's say, solve the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is the traditional methods that we use today to monoclonal antibodies are mammalian cell lines. They grow too slowly, they produce too little, and they cost too much. And if you remember during COVID, even the U.S. Army supply chain mentioned it's a 1% deadly disease. If it would have been more lethal, we would have had a major catastrophe on our hands. And that's where Ebola comes in and ties in, or hantavirus. If you have a 30% deadly disease and you don't have a way to treat it and protect the population, we're going to have the Spanish flu on steroids. And our C1 technology is a filamentous fungi. It's a microbial organism that grows much faster, like 10 times quicker than a mammalian cell. The yields are higher. You can run 3 batches at a time, you run 1, and you don't have viruses that you have to remove before you release it to the public. So you're talking about a complete transformative game changer. And we've been working on that and demonstrating not only does it bind and neutralize the virus identical to those mammalian cells, and that's been shown in a hamster study, non-human primate study that was run by Europeans during COVID with COVID, but also malaria, RSV, and 7 or 8 other antibodies. So the technology's proven that it can neutralize and bind equally to what's the status quo,
right?
But it cannot produce it at a fraction of the cost much quicker.
Wow, and that's so important. And quickly, before we run out of time, let's talk about the other end. I mean, you can't give someone a vaccine once they're infected. So explain the work that you're doing and how this may help in the big picture, if you're able to do more clinical trials in Africa, that your technology is able to nip it in the bud, so to speak, once someone's infected?
Yeah, so again, we ran a phase 1 clinical trial in Africa. Quite frankly, it was developed in part by the Israel Institute of Biological Research, manufactured there in Israel with BTG Israel and Dyadic. And we brought that vaccine under the SAFRA, the South African Regulatory Agency, and demonstrated safety, tolerability, and efficacy. But that vaccine is, again, as you point out, and I pointed out, that's something to prevent it from happening. But once it's happened, you need monoclonal antibodies. And quite frankly, we've demonstrated over and over again that our technology can make monoclonal antibodies faster, produce more for less, and release sooner. So they neutralize and bind. And if you remember, even President Trump during COVID, he went to Walter Reed and got an antibody. The problem with the antibody technology during COVID, it couldn't keep up. It mutated too fast. The technology was too slow to keep up with it. And even if it did, only 1 or 2% of the world was going to get it. So this is a potential sort of catastrophe in the wings. And Ebola is just really a wake-up call. You had Ebola, you had monkeypox, and you have, hantavirus. So we're like one mutation away from a lethal virus and we need to be prepared. And the governments in Israel and the U.S., European need to step up and really start supporting the way you manufacturing, because that's the elephant in the room.
Right.
You
Well,
can discover with AI everything,
yeah.
but you can't make it without a cell line to produce it out fast and quick.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that explanation. You made it all seem much more easy to understand because it is very complicated biology. Thank you very much, Mark Emalfarb, founder of Dyadic International. And that's all for this week's edition of Global Eye. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Emily Francis.